My name is Matthew Todd, and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Pleased today to be joined by Austin Kerr, founder of Humanagement. Good afternoon in my time zone, good morning in yours, but good to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
Awesome. So, like I mentioned before when we were talking before the episode, I'd like to kick things off by the founders themselves introducing themselves and their company. I think it's always better for people to hear it in the words of the founder rather than my interpretation. So over to you for a brief intro, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've spent about 15 years in the HR and leadership roles. Having used that, I found that there was a lot of problems that software wasn't specifically solving. There were some kind of tools around the subject of leadership or HR, but nothing really all-encompassing, right? So like in a sales world, there's like a CRM, and a CRM does like all these things that you need to get your sales in or marketing in. They're very good integrated. So basically, Humanagement is that, but for the subject of managing employees. So it does stuff like helping you with training employees, keeping track of production and metrics, time in, time off, employee profiles and all that sort of HR data, managing requests and purchase orders, all sorts of stuff like that. So it's really a all-in-one solution for managing employees.
I see. Now that makes sense. And what is it about your background that led to you thinking about creating Humanagement in the first place? What was your experience around that kind of people management area being like?
Yeah. So basically, I started my journey of managing people in the music industry, where there's a lot of people who are applying for every job in the music industry. And so you can kind of really pick of the litter. And then after that, I went into the complete opposite, and I was managing a theme park where you have a lot of very like kind of low value or, low pay employees. And you see that kind of, very stark difference. And then from there going into startup, real estate investment startup, and being with that as it grew from 5 employees all the way up to, 40 or 50. And what I saw was that all of those companies, no matter who they were, had the same employee problems, right? So when I was looking at some of the other tools and, starting, especially in that last startup, to really build out custom solutions as we had the budget to play with those things, I found that a lot of people are using tools like Monday.com or ClickUp, or even like custom-built solutions like Odoo or Salesforce, and they're building a lot of the same things, right? So they have the same problems, they're building a lot of the same things, but they're having to build it. So when a company is going, okay, great, I want something that makes managing and dealing with employees easier, they're having to shell out $40,000, $50,000 and 6 months of time, and they're having to conceptualize these ideas. And so I was talking to a lot of my friends who are business owners, and they would see the systems that I had set up, and they would be jealous. They'd go, wow, I love those systems. I wish that I could customize my ClickUp the same way that you've customized your Odoo, whatever. And I kind of realized that this problem wasn't being solved the right way, that there could be a solution that's pre-built, someone could just walk in, plug and play, and they get all the tools they need to manage and deal with employees. And so that was kind of like the inspiration.
I see. And why do you think the existing tools that are out there don't cater for those kind of needs?
I think a lot of it comes from people who develop software aren't usually thinking from an employee mindset, right? So one thing I've gotten from a lot of the people who have decided to use Humanagement is that the other software that they've used felt like it was built for programmers, right? So they didn't feel like the software was built for them, right? And you see it, right? So when you're looking at marketing software, a lot of software is built by marketing people. Those people naturally think in terms of logic. And so it's easy for them to then go and hire someone to build a marketing tool. So those tools are really well built and really intuitive. Similarly, for like a Monday.com or a ClickUp or one of these big giant all in everything tools, they're kind of very obviously built also from a programmer's mindset, right? The way that logic works and the way that you make selections, it's kind of built to be able to build custom tools easier. So it's built by people who are already building custom tools. And so when it comes to like a people software, I don't often find, even when talking in the SaaS groups that I'm a part of or fellow founders, that a lot of them are coming from a high up managerial position. They're not having those people problems and going, I'm going to build software. They're having marketing problems or tech problems or running developers, if running employees. And so all everything is very project management based. But for about 50% of the businesses out there, they don't do projects at all, right? So like a dry cleaner doesn't have projects. They have a person who takes something and they put it somewhere, right? Or the work is very repetitive. And so there aren't tools built for good repetitive work where, like, when you're dealing with developers, for instance, you're not really training them. You find someone who has some skill set and they're going to give them a problem and they're going to do research and then figure out how to build it. But you're not really training them, right? Maybe some rules of the company, et cetera. When you have someone who's like a salesperson, or let's say, someone who's putting together chairs, right? Like someone on the manufacturing floor at IKEA, these people's job is not inventive at all. There's a lot of training that goes in. When you start at Walmart, you're used to getting this giant manual of stuff, right? Here's the manual, here's the thing. Yeah. If I have a problem, I can figure out how to do it. And it's all very based on training and then repetitive work, checking someone out. But it's not the Walmart execs who are going off and building their own tech startup. So therefore, they're not bringing those same sorts of solutions out. So that's kind of the mindset behind Humanagement, is I'm trying to build those types of solutions out for people who have businesses that are mainly repetitive work.
That makes sense. I see. I think that's a really interesting perspective. I think both in terms of the kinds of platforms that software developers and technical teams build and are used to building, they build what is familiar to them. And I think the other thing you described was a lot of these other tools being like all-in-one platforms are almost going too broad, where it sounds like you've been able to successfully identify a niche whereby it's not for that type of work, it's for this type of work and for people management, and therefore you can be really specific about the needs of those employees and managers of those employees.
Exactly. Like, it's the same reason why someone who's the CEO of GE can then next be the CEO of Disney, right? Even though those are widely different companies and what they deal with, the people management is actually the same. So when you're looking at even historically how like some of these all in everything tools came about, they usually started with like being custom for a CRM, right? And they're trying to be custom for sales, because the way that McDonald's versus Disney versus GM does their sales, that is very custom. That's very unique. The way that they manage their product and building the product, that's very unique. So you need something customizable. But a lot of these people kind of just like as an afterthought went, oh yeah, and I guess you can use it for people management and your basic, I'm a manager of people. So that's kind of where I saw like that hole there, is that it was just kind of like a throw in, but it's a feature that a lot of people care about and put time into.
That makes sense. And I have had some exposure to various different HR systems and people management tools in the past as well, but those have tended to be within really big kind of enterprises, national or global companies. And then you're into the SAP, it feels very enterprise. It feels like you're using, Microsoft Windows from many, many years ago, and it's very rudimentary and basic, but infinitely customizable if you can, spend thousands of pounds or dollars right on the right consultant to customize it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. But, obviously if there's big companies who are having those advantages from having software like that, then there's a lot of smaller, newer enterprises that can use it. Like, one of the problems that a startup runs into that most people don't tell them is that the biggest problem they're going to have, the biggest problem will be getting for sales, right? So that's why there's all these sales tools out there, because that's the problem that people run into immediately. If they have a failed startup, they're usually now understand they need something for sales, then might make a marketing software. So the second problem, if they've made it past that, the second problem they're going to run into, which will just stop them in their tracks, is people management. So a company who has that high growth, like there was a company that a friend of mine had, and it was a company that did like some construction work. And so he was a really great salesperson. He was amazing. And he took that company and he bought it, and it was doing like, I don't know, maybe $100,000 a year. And within like 2 years, it was doing like 2 or 3 million, right? And it was great. The problem was that once it reached that 2 or 3 million, he was stretched as far as he could be. And because no one really trains people in the ability to delegate, in how to write good hats, how to use automation to help them bring on and onboard employees faster, even how to keep track of what your employees are producing, he was struggling at that area, and he wasn't able to get past it because every time he would try to take his attention off of doing the sales to train people up, everything would crash. And so, eventually that company would end up imploding. And that's something that happens with a lot of people who have that success. And so that's why this type of solution is so important, is because these bigger companies have figured it out. They know that this stuff is important. They know that it's worth the investment, but the smaller companies just don't have the resources. So that's kind of where Humanagement fits right in.
I see. It sounds like you found quite a nice kind of sweet spot then, and have clarity on exactly who the right kind of customer is then for Humanagement, and the benefit that they're going to get from it.
Absolutely.
So when it came to deciding to take this forward, obviously you mentioned you had experience in doing this, in individual instances and being approached by other founders and businesses to say, I wish we had that. What was it then that led you to thinking, okay, let's create a business around this?
Well, full transparency, part of the problem was that I had joined a real estate startup when it was very, very small, lots of confusion, lots of commotion, which was fun. That's why I joined. But as it became more successful and as it grew, the subject of getting some ownership came up between me and the other top executive. And because we were actively running the company while the owner had moved on to a different business. And so we had kind of made that play, and he said, that wasn't what he was looking to do. So at that point, I had kind of looked at the fact that I had very recently, over the last 5 years, done everything to build a company basically from the ground up into a very successful, award-winning company. And so I kind of started to think with like, all right, well, this is probably a good time to exit then. If I've reached the biggest, highest I can be, and, I know that I have the skills to build a company and manage employees, then I should go and do that work for my own company. And so that kind of happened right at the moment that I was also getting this feedback on the systems that I had built for the current company. And so that's kind of where I was going, okay. I did a really big look into like industries, right? So I've done a lot of kind of ad hoc consulting work as well. And there's a few other passions that I have. And I was kind of looking at all these different models, and software is really attractive because you're going to do a lot of time and work to build something up front. But then if you do it right, you're basically going to be able to get a return on that investment for years and years to come. Whereas a lot of other industries, the expenses scale up with the sales. SaaS isn't like that. So I kind of figured spending 2 years building a software, I could afford it. I could make it work while I was having my job. And then, it was worth that gamble, to bet on myself that I could put in that work and then it would return.
I see. Yeah. It sounds like you had kind of quite a lot of indicators that could give you confidence that there was market need for it, and also timing wise with your current position, it sounded like you were in an ideal kind of place and time to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely the right time and right place. I mean, had I not been able to have the free income to be able to invest, or had I, not been in such a good position, it would be much harder to do this. I mean, I would have to go and get funding and do a much different leap, but I'm very, very lucky to have been in the position I am.
Yeah. So how long then did it take from that point to start getting the first customers on the initial version of the platform?
So kind of initially, just because, like I said, I had quite a few friends that had mentioned my systems, I was able to get, I don't know, about, I think it was like 7 companies in after
Nice.
I'd built like kind of the very basic MVP. So about 6 months in, I had about 7 companies that were in it. And then it wasn't until about 4 or 5 months ago that I took the software public. So I kind of just stayed with that 7 for a while. And then now I've been able to, get at least one to two additional companies every week or so.
I see. That sounds like a good size initial customer base. I think it's one or two is perhaps not quite enough to get useful feedback, but I think as soon as you get to five or more, that's when you can get a lot of useful and valuable insights into what you're doing right, what you should be building as well.
Yeah, and one of the people who was my brother-in-law, he had a book publishing company that he had had for a while, like 4 or 5 years, and I don't think he had ever been able to really get it off the ground. Like he still had to have a day job, and I don't know whether or not it was profitable, but obviously marginally so. And so within about a year of using Humanagement, he was able to scale his company up to, I think, 4 or 5 full-time employees. It's now his full-time job, and he attributes that fully to the fact that Humanagement has taken away his worry on bringing in new employees. He knows that those systems and everything will be there, so it's not just like a bunch of things falling on his shoulders.
Yeah, I see. So it's kind of giving him the tool set, but also the confidence because of that to grow.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, the idea of bringing on employees is very concerning, right? Because you're going to commit yourself into paying someone, and you're going to pay them regularly, and you have to make sure that what they do is going to return more income. And so for a lot of people, and they know they're going to get requests about time off and for perks and lots of questions, and how will that affect what they're doing. So fortunately for me, I have the experience of running large teams, large and small teams. So I really look forward to that myself. I'm just waiting for the days that I can hire more and more staff, because I know that that'll bring so much more momentum. But for people who, have never had a role in leadership of that volume before, people who were a great salesperson or who were great at woodworking and decided to start doing some woodworking, and now they have started to expand, and they're getting more orders than they can fill, and they're thinking, okay, now I'm going to have to hire someone to make chairs the way that I do. That's a terrifying thought for so many people. And so being able to give that confidence that it's not going to be that bad, that they're going to be able to have things organized from day one, really does help people propel themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can definitely see that. And I know a lot of startups that have certainly gone through a lot of those growing pains, and businesses, not just technical businesses, but businesses in all different sectors. I know the founders, do take on too much. They want to delegate, but in some cases they're just, they don't have confidence in delegating someone because they know that they can do it best, and they don't know how to train people. And like you say, the thought of managing other people and being responsible for them as well just gives so many doubts and questions. Well, how do I even do that? Like you say, there's the time off question. There's so many things you have to consider that are just part and parcel of managing people. Yeah,
exactly. It's a whole challenge. It's a whole field that I feel like so many people, unfortunately, are just not really trained up in. And one of the unfortunate things about the way that the world kind of deals with this kind of people management subject is that I feel like had a lot of more people understood fully what it means to own a business and have employees, they might have made different decisions before they got in, or how they got in, whether or not to have a partner, because it's something that ends up being crippling for a lot of people. I mean, you see ads all the time for business coaches that are talking about how CEOs are not able to take vacation, how they don't spend enough time with their family. And that's kind of the opposite of what a lot of people go into business thinking they're going to do. They think they're going to have so much more free time, so much more flexibility, and instead it ends up just kind of controlling their life. So it definitely doesn't have to be that way. I mean, one of the things that is really important about Humanagement is also customer success. So we always make sure that the people have not just someone to help them with the software, but someone that they can ask questions to about managing employees, kind of not a business coach, but able to have a terminal there who can help you kind of think through some of these problems, how to best set up the training and these sort of things, because people need the help.
Absolutely. And I think it's always interesting for me to look at SaaS platforms that have that element of service around them as well, no matter if it's kind of a very light touch or in some cases it's more involved. But I think it shows a genuine commitment to the success of their customers and a deep understanding of their customers and the problems they can solve for them, versus, oh, I've got a great idea for a tool, let me create this and see if I can get some people to use it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and
So
that's also been an interesting challenge because a lot of startup companies, a lot of SaaSes kind of go off of this like big kind of pivot, like really based on like finding market fit, which is definitely a big factor. I wouldn't say that that's not important at all. For Humanagement, though, because I have such a certainty about the product, it's been a little
yeah.
bit more about kind of figuring out how to market the product that I have, trying to figure out, which feature to put forward first, and kind of that for the product market fit, as opposed to like changing what tool I have in general, because I do have the track record and I do know that this specific tool is something that people need.
Yeah, I think that's massively interesting. I think that shows a real confidence driven by experience in terms of you know, as you say, you know what the problems are going to be. You know some of the things to have to solve them. So you're not trying to find some people that can hopefully tell you what the problem is and then infer a solution from that. You've already got confidence in knowing that. So yeah, it's up to you then how you take that forward to deliver Humanagement as a successful product and business. So I suppose my kind of question leading on from what you just said then will be, how have you approached generating new customers, growing and marketing the platform?
So a lot of things still have been on the kind of word of mouth sense. Yeah. Obviously, because of the route that I'm going, it does mean a little bit of a slower start, but more momentum as it grows and I kind of educate the people to these type of solutions. One of the big things that I've done, subtle pivot, at least for like the marketing sense, is like there's a lot of features, a lot of things that it does. And so the feedback that I was getting from a lot of people who went in were kind of that they saw the solutions and they saw how much they needed it, but the barrier of integrating 19 different features into their staff at once was too much. And so I found a lot of success by allowing people to turn on and off features, marketing one specific feature. Like the main thing that I usually explain to people when trying to get them into the software is the knowledge base. So, which is also for training and it also works as an LMS. So you can put your policies in there. You can assign those to different employee groups. When the employee is added, they'll be assigned those policies or those courses automatically. It tracks on the policy level who's read each one, like attestations. So instead of it being one whole course, which has many modules, and you maybe need to know just one specific thing or maybe one thing updates, it handles updating staff and getting them to acknowledge the new versions, all that stuff automatically really, really well.
I see.
And that's something that doesn't take a lot of time to set up. You just add your employees and then put a few articles in, and then the automation's there. So doing that and explaining that part has been a lot easier to get someone to come on board and then just use that. Now, all the other tools are there, and then I can do the job of continuing to educate them on those tools as they're using the software, because their employees are already in and they didn't have to confront the whole thing. They can roll out things one by one. So that's been really successful for people. And they like knowing that those features are there because they know that it will grow with them and that it will handle the problems they need, but it also allows them to just kind of, start slow and start at their own pace, because the last thing a business executive needs is to try to integrate their whole company into a new software for the next 2-3 months. Like, that's not going to save them.
Yeah, absolutely. You're trying to make their lives easier, so you don't want to go in and overwhelm them by months worth of solid work in order to get the proposed benefits. You've got to start somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. So they can just take all their Word files that they've been ignoring because they're confusing, and they can just upload them in there, all their organizations there, and then right there they've gotten value. Because, I mean, from a sales side too, one of the really great things about my software is that it's very sticky. Like, sticky is the term they use, meaning that like someone can't leave super easily because so much of their data ends up being in there and integrates so well into their processes. That stickiness is really vital for me as the product owner. But kind of trying to, like I was saying, merge that area where they're not having to commit so far into the future when they just start, but able to integrate it fully.
That makes a lot of sense. I can see how carefully managing that onboarding process really does set them up for success and set you up for success with them as well. It sounds like that has to be quite carefully and intelligently managed so that, as you say, they do get that value. There is that stickiness, but it's done in a controlled way that's easy for them to get on board with.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's probably most of what the attention units are on right now, is just making that onboarding, making that first month, 2 months as easy and as comfortable as possible. And that's kind of like what I mean when I was saying earlier, the pivot is a little bit different in this software, because I know the features and everything are what's needed, but that I'm still listening to the market. I'm still going, okay, well, what is the most useful? What's going to give you the most value? And I'm making those adjustments for that pivot while not changing the whole product, just because I do, like you said, have that faith and that knowledge.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I think people should take away from this conversation, is something that I think a lot of people can neglect, which is the importance of the quality of that onboarding process. A lot of people might say, oh, I've got this platform, it's got all these great features, 25 different features, whatever it might be. I've got, good marketing, I've got a good sales team. And they're like, oh, great, we've got a new customer. Let's celebrate and throw the platform at them. And maybe we'll ask them a little pop-up when they first log in, or something that asks them some questions to get them started. But that's very different from an onboarding process that's designed quite specifically to give early value.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. And how much of your time in marketing then is spent teaching them about platform features versus teaching them about ways that they can solve the kind of people management problems that they've got? Because I imagine if you're introducing people to new ways of working enabled by your platform, there's got to be a balance of this is the platform and how it works versus this is actually how you should be setting up your teams for success when managing people in the first place.
Yeah, so definitely more on the side of this is how you can successfully manage people. I'm almost at this point, as I've kind of continued to listen to the market, I've basically ignored most of the features that the software does in marketing, because if I'm going to market something, I'm almost going to market it as only one simple tool, and then I'll kind of, as an aftermention, say it also does lots of other things. Just because my main goal isn't really on selling them on the whole concept. My main goal is providing a value that they can obtain right now. And so then like the kind of further education of features is more set up through the email follow-ups or additional pop-ups that will go a month or two later going, hey, are you doing this? Or, an email from customer success, kind of once they get used to one feature, kind of enlightening them about the next.
I see. Yeah. So when someone is coming on board to Humanagement, or they're interested, or they're the right kind of customer and business to come on the platform, then how do you kind of identify, how are they typically presenting themselves? Are there kind of common problems that they are describing that they might not realize are kind of indicators that they need the kind of help that you can offer?
Well, a lot of times right now, I mean, it's more in my targeting than in their thing. I mean, when you're doing a one-on-one onboarding, you're kind of going to ask a lot of questions, and then to make sure that you're able to solve those. But a lot of for people that I'm working with are HR people, kind of like the moment when someone could really use my software and it's more of a need versus a want is the moment when they've hired like their first HR person. Okay. So a lot of first HR people are at companies are usually not very experienced. They've maybe held HR in a junior role, or just kind of used to the idea, or often they'll be a family member or a friend of the owner when you're talking about a company that has, 30, 40 employees, 20, 30, 40 employees. So a lot of my kind of targeting has been to those people, because they're looking at a lot of the problems that I'm solving like right now. They're right now going, ooh, well, I mean, I guess maybe I could sign up with a Bamboo, but that seems really robust. And I have all these Excel sheets everywhere that I just created or I'm thinking about creating. And so, a good owner is going to be empowering their HR to find solutions that will work in the long term. And so when I can find someone who's right at that exact moment, it's a very, very easy sale. Sometimes it's CEOs, but most of the time I found that, it's kind of talking to HR and going, well, it does all this stuff for the training and everything that Bamboo HR does. It does that stuff too, but it also has these other features that your whole company will find useful.
Yeah, I see. I think that's really interesting. I always like to, when talking to founders, I always like to kind of see how they perceive the needs of their market and audience. And I think it's really good that you have those kind of clear indicators and signals and clear idea as to the types of people in the stage they're at and where they are and what they're trying to achieve. I think that's, definitely something that will certainly make any kind of sale process and the ability to add that value during onboarding so much, easier for you, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a really big believer in surveys. So I've spent a lot of money on paid surveys. There's some great sites like Usability Hub or Respondent.io where you can get really great insights from people you're paying. There's money you're spending, but if you're going to waste that money anyways on some ads that, as you're trying to test things out and figure out, then it's not really that big of an expense. But because that someone's signing up for feedback, you can get a lot more insights, and it's really, really valuable. You can build products better that way. You can build things better that way, as well as talking to the customers. I think that one of the instincts, I've had it and so many people have it, is that they will kind of decide that they know what someone wants, right? Yeah. And so I've done that a little bit, obviously, with the actual software itself, but even that is based on talking to a lot of people and verifying that this is a problem that's common for all these people that they currently don't really have a solution in mind for. But when it comes to the marketing and stuff like that, asking questions is always going to be better than making a decision on the marketing side. Yeah.
I think that's interesting. I don't hear of many people using paid surveys as a route to do that kind of research, but I think that's definitely interesting, and something I would be inclined to look at and encourage others to take a look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, interesting. So, in terms of what's next then for Humanagement, what's the kind of vision for where you want to get it to, and how are you looking to kind of grow it over the next few months or so?
So, like I said, the biggest thing right now is just continuing to work on that onboarding processes, more help docs, more hints, when you hover over something, it'll tell you what it is, more kind of customized flows based on different user permissions, building so that an employee is getting completely different information than an owner in the company and so forth. So, better ways to kind of send and onboard new employees. So being able to send an email and then they'll kind of get asked all the questions that'll fill out the information, fill out their preferences and stuff like that. So that's the main area. Integrations. Overall, where I'm planning on taking the software is basically because I have such a kind of built for you platform that is able to make a lot of the decisions on how things are going to run. The main idea is to, in the future, bring out more AI stuff to be able to make more business predictions based on the data that's in there. So once I have enough data, enough employees, I'll be able to take that and then build out some really great models that'll be able to make actionable suggestions for companies. And I think that once I have the data, and because of the way that I have things set up, it'll make an even bigger change into the software world.
And what kind of decisions do you see that being able to get involved in?
Well, so I'll kind of explain that from another one of the features that a lot of people find useful, which is business metrics, right? So kind of similar to how someone might use like a Power BI to build a dashboard. My stats thing is a lot simpler. There's a very, very low barrier to entry. You can kind of just go in there and it's basically just a graph that'll keep track of something. So you say, I don't know, I get orders in every day. So I'm going to get some automation, or I'm going to manually put in and make a graph of that. But rather than just having that data siloed, you can also go and get data from your sales and go, well, this is my income. And then your support request and go, this is my number of support requests. And so using all that in one area, you can then make additional calculations, sales divided by support requests. Well, are my supports scaling up with my income? And that sort of data gives you a more powerful indicator of how well you're scaling your company. If you're getting way more support requests than your income is increasing, then you know that you're kind of facing a problem coming up. And so
interesting.
Yeah, some people don't do business like that, right? But you kind of hear it and you know that would probably be smart, right? your number of followers compared to your number of subscribers compared to your sponsorship income. All those things matter. Those numbers all matter together. And so someone just using the system now can very easily go in and find out how different employees are affecting different numbers and different metrics by comparison and looking at graphs. In the future, it would be cool to integrate more statistics and numbers based upon use of the software. And then you could make suggestions like, maybe Bob should be getting a raise because he's been producing more regularly at this level, or this is how much he's affecting your total income. Even if Bob wasn't a salesperson, maybe he's a support person, but a software could, with enough kind of pre-built knowledge and maybe a little bit of answering some questions, be able to tell this support person is really affecting your way that your income is being generated. And so if AI could kind of do that, again, I'm not there now, but being able to do that with this sort of system, I think could be really powerful for people.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think a lot of people, when they look at similar metrics to that, it could be looking at it from a finance and accounting perspective, or they could be looking at it from like a projects-based perspective. And I think it is certainly very rare in my experience to see anyone seeing that from a people perspective and a people management perspective. But I think maybe that is the perspective that many businesses are actually lacking.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems that I have found so many businesses have, and it's so saddening because it really does create an issue, is that people don't know the value of their employee, right? This is a primary question that if you asked even people at large companies, what's the value of this employee? How does this employee affect your income? They're not really going to be able to tell you with any sort of certainty, right? With a salesperson, you kind of understand. But from your HR person, how much does your HR person affect your income, right? And so many people, because so many people don't know that, when that HR person says, hey, I need a raise, I want an extra $5,000 a year, it kind of creates this concern in the pit of a manager or a owner's stomach going, I think that makes sense. I have income coming in, or maybe they don't have income coming in. They know that this person's valuable and they're going, well, I mean, maybe if I give them more money, I'll make more. Maybe I can tell them to focus more on training the salespeople and then that will create this. But unfortunately, businesses are pretty complicated. There's some parts that are simple, right? And especially when you run things your own. And I think that's why so many people decide to run businesses just themselves and not really expand past that 1-2 mil mark, is because in their head, it all makes sense. They know what the valuable actions are, what to put attention on. Especially if they made it past that first $100,000, $200,000 mark, they've kind of figured this sort of stuff out and it's in their head and they understand it. And what a lot of business owners don't do well is when they start bringing in employees, they don't continue to have that same control and knowledge that they had over their own body and have that over other people. Because if you do, then you know that this job is vital, right? So this job, making sure that the kitchen is stocked the right way is a vital activity. That increases productivity by 5%, right? That's the sort of data that like, you would expect like a Google to pay like some $1 billion analyst to come and tell them this sort of data. But if you kind of start just keeping some metrics, right? So I wouldn't say like worry about that sort of data when you first start, because that sounds overwhelming and I probably overwhelmed anyone who was listening. But if you start by just keeping track of a few simple things, right? So let's say you start, like for instance, on Humanagement, you can sign up for and get 6 stats and a public knowledge base that you can send to people for free. That's free forever, right? So you can just go and do that, and I suggest it. So if you go in there and you just go, okay, I want to keep track of a few things so I can like make sure I continue to think systematically as I'm scaling, right? So you should keep track of your gross income. You can integrate with like Stripe or PayPal or whatever so that it will keep that track of that automatically. So you can get gross income. You should also keep track of your number of staff, right? You can just keep track of it weekly. And then you're going to create a calculated stat where you're going to divide your gross income by your number of staff. And that's going to tell you right there, as you're adding employees, are they adding to the bottom line? right?
Yeah,
Because it'll say $600 per employee. And then you add a new employee, within a month or two, it should still say 600, because when you first add them, it's going to drop to 500. And then you're going to, have that income increase, hopefully, because what they're going to do is bring it in. And just that one piece of data tells you, at least at that small stage, how your hiring is going. Are you hiring people correctly? And that's super easy. That's almost automatic. It takes like no time. But just having that, you'll kind of start thinking. And then as you go and you hire another employee, you'll think, oh, well, maybe I should also keep track of my expenses. Maybe I should integrate with QuickBooks and get that expense data. And then also do a calculation with that. And then now you can continue to think, oh, okay, I understand what, and they ask for a raise. You can go, well, yeah, I can see that because my income by staff is increasing. So yeah, it makes sense to give them a raise. Or no, it doesn't, because it's not increasing. I can actually bring that up as a powerful metric. And right there, that concern on bringing new employees has been lessened.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. And yes, excellent advice for anyone to take and that's starting that hiring process, certainly the startups stage and starting to scale is, start approaching it systematically, start thinking about your business in that way, because I think that shows, as you say, whether the people you're bringing into your business are adding value. Yeah.
And another reason why it's so important to keep track of a metric, I would say at least one metric per employee, right? So for instance, my sister, who I help run her company a little bit, she's a voice teacher and she has quite a big voice practice. She has about 10 full-time instructors and they do like 300 lessons a week. And so she has all of her instructors just keep a stat of their number of students, right? This is how many students they have this week. This is how many students they have the next week. Very simple number. Anyone can input that, right? But so many businesses wouldn't have it. So because she has that, she can have a meeting with them. And if they ask for a raise or ask for something, she can go, okay, well, here's your graph. I can see that it's decreasing slightly or it's increasing slightly. Or over on this week, you had this big spike. What was that? Maybe you can duplicate that.
Yeah.
And right there, she's kind of taking this pressure off of her. When someone comes in and they are demanding something or asking something to change, she can then go, okay, well, let's look at your graph. This shows actual data. Now we're able to make data-driven decisions. And now that process, it's easy and not stressful. And, you're able to give instructions.
Yeah, and there's reason for it as well. You can make informed decisions rather than, does that sound about right or not? Or is that risky or is that not risky?
Yeah, or another employee goes, oh, well, I found out they got a $5 raise. I should get a $5 raise. And you go, well, look, their graph has been going like this, and your graph has been going like this. So no.
Yeah.
And they'll go,
yeah, exactly.
Well, how can I get their raise? Oh, simple. Get your graph going like this. Oh, okay. And then they're on their way, right? That would have been that's a very negative experience a lot of people get, where they'll give one good raise to someone who's a high performer. It'll come out because, you can't really keep that stuff separate or a secret. Yep. And then you're going to get that question and people are going to come to you now demanding the same treatment. Business owners run into that all the time.
Yeah. Very stressful situation for business owners. So yeah, definitely good to be able to have even just simple metrics, like you say, that contribute towards making that decision, but also communicating that decision when you have to as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. No, interesting. I think, I want to be respectful of your time. And I think we've already discussed quite a lot of really interesting key points that I think people should take away. And I could probably talk for hours about it. I think it's a really interesting subject. And I think what you show is a really interesting perspective that I think especially a lot of people in technical businesses as well will come from that project background or agile background or whatever it is, that's probably not lending itself towards thinking about how best to manage different kinds of employees within a business, especially as it scales and you start to have to get different people involved and different disciplines as well. So I think it's been fascinating talking this through, and I hope we do have a follow-up conversation and we kind of see a little bit further down the line how the platform has developed and the kind of customers you're helping as well, and how far you are towards that AI as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great, man.
Yeah, so no, thank you very much for taking the time. I'll make sure that we do put links into Humanagement in the notes for the podcast for people that want to check it out for themselves as well. But no, thank you again for taking the time today. Really interesting conversation.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.